From major franchises to brutally clever indie hits, 2017 was a fantastic year for horror. Sure, you probably already know about heavy hitters like It and Get Out, but plenty of other great horror films were also released during the year. If you're in the mood for some spine-tingling additions to your queue, here are our picks for the best horror movies of 2017. Split. M. Night Shyamalan has had a rocky decade or so, but Split was definitely a return to his twisty form. The story focused on the abduction of a group of young women by a man with multiple personalities, which made for a taut and claustrophobic thriller, anchored by actor James McAvoy's transitions between his characters' many identities. Critics praised his performance, as well as Shyamalan's ability to balance those shifting points of view, and channel the filmmaking prowess that made him a name to watch after The Sixth Sense. Even better, the director used his trademark twist in a way that no one saw coming, setting up a must-see sequel. Stephen King's It. Send in the clowns. Stephen King's It was previously adapted as a TV miniseries in 1990, and that live-action version of the author's horror classic still gives us nightmares, but it's nothing compared to director Andy Muschietti's big screen version.
Hiya, Georgie. What a nice boat.
The film earned rave reviews, with critics hailing it as a terrifying and clever exploration of the psychological trauma King captured so well in his novel. Bill Skarsgård's take on Pennywise the Clown is basically face-painted nightmare fuel, so taking a trip to the sewers of Derry is well worth the risk. Because hey, we all float down there, right? Get Out. This isn't just one of the best horror movies of 2017, it's one of the best horror films of the past decade. Writer and director Jordan Peele leaves you guessing right up until the end, slowly ratcheting up the terror with a story that starts out like any other innocent, average dramedy. Peel back a few layers, though, and the story tackles race relations through the lens of a horror tale, serving up a sharp, thoughtful, funny blend of horror and social satire that treads almost a bit too close to reality at times, in ways that will make your skin crawl. The Devil's Candy. This indie horror flick focuses on an artist who starts painting terrifying images after moving into a new home. And then someone starts terrorizing him and his family.
I don't remember painting this.
This scary look into the depths of human depravity doubles as a clever subversion of the horror movie tropes viewers have come to expect, and was thus one of the most underrated movies of the year. Lake Bottom. If you're looking for a throwback to the classic days when machete-wielding maniacs prowled the woods and menaced unsuspecting teens, book a trip to director Talani Mustinen's Lake Bottom. This classically styled slasher focuses on the urban legend of a viciously fatal night that occurred decades ago, as a group of teens plan a trip to investigate and recreate the events of the old tale. But it turns out they're in for a lot more than a mere homage. Even if the movie doesn't exactly reinvent the gore genre, this is still a scary good time. Life. This space-set sci-fi horror flick hit the sweet spot by throwing The Thing, Gravity, and Alien into a blender. The result was a whole lot of terrifying fun. It focuses on the crew of the International Space Station as they investigate a mysterious new life form that's been recovered on Mars. Their experiments quickly take a turn for the worse when they realize this alien creature might be a lot smarter and more sinister than they'd given it credit for.
Life's very existence requires destruction.
It Comes at Night. This post-apocalyptic psychological horror flick picks up after a virus has wiped out most of the world's population. The story focuses on a family that's cut itself off from the rest of the world to avoid the plague. When another group of survivors join them, paranoia and fear of what might be in the woods drives them beyond the edge. Critics praised the film for finding terror in the relationship among survivors and bringing a refreshingly simple doom to a tale of the apocalypse. A Dark Song. When you dabble in the dark arts, it's almost certainly destined to go wrong. That's the premise behind A Dark Song, which follows two people who retreat into a house in the woods to try and make contact with those in the beyond. What happens will stick with you long after the movie ends, nestling into your psyche for some lingering scares. It might have initially flown under the radar, but A Dark Song is well worth a visit. Raw. The story of a vegetarian who develops a taste for raw meat is an interesting narrative, but Raw rings that premise for all it's worth and more, telling a story with deep social and emotional poignancy, with a clever spin on the challenges of adolescence. And the way writer and director Julia Ducournau wraps that story is a gory masterpiece positively dripping with viscera and blood. The Girl with All the Gifts. One of the smartest zombie movies in recent years, The Girl with All the Gifts uses the undead to explore some deeper emotional and philosophical questions. The story focuses on a group of children who are somehow immune to an epidemic disease which has destroyed the world, and the role they can play in saving humanity. It might be a post-apocalyptic zombie story with doses of sci-fi, but the film is packed with more than a few good scares. Annabelle Creation. The Conjuring has quickly become one of the biggest horror franchises of the decade, and the latest spin-off from the creepy mothership does not disappoint. Annabelle Creation, the second film to focus on the nefarious antique doll featured in the main Conjuring films, jumps back in time to tell a story from when Annabelle was still a relatively new danger doll. A marked improvement over the first Annabelle film, the film was a surprisingly moody and effective horror yarn. Happy Death Day. If you're looking for a horror flick with some biting humor, make a date with Happy Death Day. It's Groundhog Day with a bloody slasher twist. The film centers on a college student who's executed on her birthday, which she has to keep reliving over and over until she can figure out who attacked her. The story has charm, and although derivative, offers up some authentic thrills and humor for audiences of the jump scare persuasion. The Babysitter. Netflix's The Babysitter is one heck of a fun little horror romp, best described as an R-rated, blood-soaked, titillating modern-day spin on a 1980 horror B-movie. It's obviously low budget, but although it's not high art, the film is well worth the hour and a half it takes to kick back and enjoy it. It's a cheesy good time, so give it a shot and The Babysitter might just be the silly little surprise you needed this year. Better Watch Out. Critics are calling this one Home Alone meets The Strangers because the film puts a spin on the home invasion thriller formula. Better Watch Out follows what happens when invaders break into a home protected by a group of kids and their babysitter. Instead of retreating in fear, the kids start setting booby traps and have a whole lot of R-rated fun in the process to protect the house, with plenty of twists to unwrap before the credits roll.
This is exciting.
Super Dark Times. If you're looking for a VHS-era throwback, the 1990s set Super Dark Times finds terror in the simple, boring life of suburbia. The visceral thriller is considered a coming-of-age nightmare and landed to near-universal critical acclaim. The story follows a group of teens who are driven apart following the disappearance of another teen and presents a bygone era of innocence through a bloody, intense lens. Gerald's Game. Stephen King's collection has been all over the small and silver screens this year, but the latest adaptation quietly slipped under the radar, despite being one of the best of the bunch. Gerald's Game follows a wife who's left shackled to a bed after a weekend getaway with her husband takes a dark turn. She's forced to face everything from starvation to her own doubts and demons as she tries to find a way to escape and survive. The novel was previously thought to be unfilmable, so imagine everyone's surprise when the movie not only happened, but turned out to be pretty great, without sacrificing the meat of the story. Thanks for watching. Click the looper icon to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Plus, check out all this cool stuff we know you'll love too.